Welcome to NFL where NFL starts and ends. I'm your host, Jacob. And as many of you are likely aware, ESPN got rid of or laid off 20 people. And it's my professional opinion to say they didn't just get rid of 20 people. They got rid of 20 people who are serious people. ESPN is trying very hard to make this from the worldwide leader in sports, which is their moniker that they keep trying to indulge us with, to we're just trying to entertain you for the amount of time that you're watching our network. The people that they left go, and the notable names are Jeff Van Gundy, Jalen Rose, Max Kellerman, Suzy Kolber, Steve Young, Rob Ninkovich, Matt Hasselbeck, Todd McShay, and that's only right now. About 2 days ago, it was also announced that sports betting insider, I hope I pronounced his name right, Doug Kazarian's contract would not be renewed, and boxing analyst Andre Ward, a former world champion, also announced that he was leaving the organization via Twitter. Quote from Ward, "Tonight's show was the last fight under my ESPN contract," Ward wrote on Sunday. "It's been a great ride, and I'm going to miss the whole ESPN crew that I've worked with for the last 6 years. I'm excited about my future and the chances to work on new projects and endeavors. Great things are ahead." ESPN has gotten rid of people before. In 2020, they got rid of about 300 people behind the scenes, and there was community outrage at that time. The community outrage was like, "Why won't you get rid of people who are on air? Your on-air talent makes so much more money." Well, now they have, and it's made people even more angry. ESPN, I feel, like as I said before, got rid of all the serious people. Jeff Van Gundy, who ESPN is for whatever reason is smitten by the idea of we must have a 3 crew in one of our sports. So when they get to basketball, it was Mike Breen, Mark Jackson, and Jeff Van Gundy. And that's fine. But you just got rid of Jeff Van Gundy and you decided we're gonna put Doris Burke with them. When we could easily just go and say, Mike Breen, Mike Jackson, just you do you. We'll make it a lot easier for people to follow along instead let's add Doris Burke. Why? I don't know. So they get rid of Jeff Van Gundy. Jalen Rose, the one guy on their panel who's actually played the game, as I understand Mike Wilbon and Stephen A. Smith, who we'll talk about Stephen A. Smith momentarily, they covered the game a long time. Mike Greenberg was the anchor of that show, was able to bring it from point A to point B to point C, but Jalen Rose was the only guy who played in the NBA on their panel, and they got rid of him. Now, I bring up Stephen A. Smith because Stephen A. Smith, who does pretty much what we do here on NFL World, went and said on his podcast, I guess you would call it, that he could be next, that there's more incoming and that he could be next. Well, first of all, why would they get rid of their prize cow? And I'm not saying that because how I feel about him, even though I don't really care about what he does. I think it's just entertainment in general. But they're not going to get rid of him. In fact, when Stephen A. was talking about the Pat McAfee contract, he went on and said, Pat is making more money than me, but that's because he negotiated his contract now, and I negotiated my contract a couple years ago. I don't disagree with that statement at all, but I do want to admit this. I think if ESPN got rid of Stephen A., that whole company would grind to a halt. there is no one that they depend on more than Stephen A. Even though there are takes that they ask him to do, which he shouldn't be doing. Him talking about women's tennis, I don't think Stephen A. Smith has watched women's tennis in his life. Just because you can talk about something doesn't mean you should talk about something. When you don't know exactly what you are talking about, that doesn't make you the best at what you do. You should be talking to people who actually know what they're talking about. That's my whole issue with ESPN. You got rid of people that know what they are talking about. They got rid of Suzy Kolber, who was there for 27 years, 38 years as a broadcaster, 27 years as a guy for ESPN, or as a person for ESPN. You got rid of Max Kellerman, who has been there for there's a fly running around in this house right now. That's why. But you got rid of Suzy Kolber, who's been there for 27 years, but she's a serious host. She's very serious in how she operates. You got rid of Steve Young, who is a very serious person, but he's been there for 22 years. You got rid of Max Kellerman, who, when it comes to boxing, there is no one better in that place to lead a show than Max Kellerman. But you got rid of him. You demoted him after what happened on First Take. You demoted him to him having his own show and him being a part of another show with Keyshawn Johnson, who you also let go. Because those guys know how to either lead a show, how to be part of a show, know what they're talking about, where I'm not saying none of these other people know what they're talking about, don't know what they're talking about. I'm saying you got rid of the serious people to indulge the remainder of the audience into let's just be crazy and wacky. You got rid of Matt Hasselbeck, who the only guy on your one of the only guys on your team as a network that actually knew what it was like to be a starter in the NFL for an extended period of time and be a backup for an extended period of time. He's the only one that knew that. You got rid of him. You got rid of Rob Ninkovich, a guy who won Super Bowls with the New England Patriots. Why you got rid of him, I have no idea. You got rid of Todd McShay, an insider for the draft, but you have Mel Kiper, so why is that much of a fail? Each of them, Suzy Kolber tweeted out after, he said, "Today I joined the many hard-working colleagues who have been laid off. Heartbreaking, but 27 years at ESPN was a good run. So grateful for a 38-year career. Longevity for a woman in this business is something I'm especially proud of. Next step, a project that gives back." And the comments have been there's one comment that has actually got an on this was posted on July 1st. The comment reads, "I always considered Van Gundy's talents being wasted by ESPN. He, Breen, and Mark Jackson had great chemistry, and I hope TNT makes him an offer if that's something he wishes to continue. If ESPN wants to save money, there's Stephen A. and Will Baum." I'm not saying that you guys should get rid of Stephen A. and Mike Will, but I'm just saying that there's people you got rid of all the serious people, the people who either are very serious or know what they're talking about. Why did you do that? That was a waste of time. I understand Disney, who runs ESPN, they're like the parent company is what they've been referred to as. They've last year they made anywhere northwards of about $24 billion. It was interesting that you got rid of, and I'll read the whole list right now. Many of these people you either have no idea that they got released or have no idea who they are. But if you do know, then you will obviously be in the know. The people they got rid of: Jeff Van Gundy, Jalen Rose, Keyshawn Johnson, Max Kellerman, Suzy Kolber, Chris Cello, Matt Hasselbeck, Steve Young, Rob Ninkovich, Neil Everett, Ashley Brewer, June Lee, Alfonso Ellis, Todd McShay, Jordan Cornette, Jason Fitz, and David Pollock. You got rid of people that don't fit your narrative. And instead of deciding to change your narrative, you went and did this. Now, I've read this, and there's a lot of people who've talked about this. Flemlo has talked about this on his YouTube channel. Brandon Pena on That's Good Sports have talked about it. ESPN has said that it's a money issue. I don't disagree that it's a money issue. I'm just saying you got rid of people that know exactly what they're talking about. Which brings me back to Pat McAfee, who we've talked about very recently, about the backlash that he's been receiving. It's not his. You can't blame Pat McAfee for what is going on, but they brought in Pat McAfee. The ESPN had a chance at Pat McAfee and had him and decided to let him go early on, and then he created an empire. So ESPN said, "We need this." So they got Pat McAfee and his crew. What they really need is not just Pat McAfee and his crew. They need the Pat McAfee Show template and allowing Pat to do what he wants, who he wants on, allowing him to do everything so he can work his tail off as a performer. They need the Pat McAfee Show template. A lot of these people who are guys that were involved in these shows, if they would have been able to say whatever they want and talk about whatever they want and how they wanted to talk about it, they would have. There's a reason why the Dan Orlovskis, the Kendrick Perkins, the Stephen A. Smiths, the J.J. Reddicks are not on this list. They're not on this list not because they are smarter than these people. They're not. They're on this list because when they go on YouTube, who gets more clicks? Dan Orlovsky clips or a Steve Young clip or a J.J. Redick clip or a Jalen Rose clip. It's not even comparative. It's not comparative. They want to have shows like that. People who are fun in their mind. And these guys don't qualify as that. Now, it brings me back to Pat McAfee because when you see a live stream happening, you'll see the video and then you'll see the little corner and it'll say live. Maybe about a week or two ago, I saw on the Pat McAfee show, it's Pat, it's AJ Hawk, and in the middle it's Kendrick Perkins. And I said, nope, I'm not watching. Nope. I'd rather watch someone throw an anchor in the bottom of an ocean over and over again. I'd much rather watch that because you're not knowledgeable. You're just there because you can scream very loudly and maybe someone will hear you. And that's not good broadcasting. That's not good at being good at your job. I'm just gonna scream very loudly and hope this gets a lot of clicks on YouTube, on Twitter, and all that. That's not how you should describe the sport. Now, I will wanna say this. Jeff Van Gundy, Jalen Rose, Suzy Kolber, Steve Young, Todd McShay, they're probably not gonna have a very difficult time in finding jobs if they wanna do that. Because with how podcasts are, you're either gonna join a podcast or you're already a part of a podcast and probably gonna join another one. Like, there's people that are now working for the 33rd team, that former general managers, former beat writers, former everything. They're working for the former players. So it's not gonna be that shocking if Jalen Rose gets a job. Rob Ninkovich, Steve Young, because they are very knowledgeable and they would be worth it. The one that's interesting, I thought, was Todd McShay, because I was like, "Oh, that's a guy that they really liked, but they had Mel Kiper, so they felt, oh, we could get rid of him." So, it won't be hard for Todd McShay to find a job. Either he'll start a podcast, he'll go on another network like a lot of these other people will, or start his own and have sponsorship deals. Maybe he'll do that too. Who knows? But to me, this was all because they got rid of the people who actually knew what they were talking about that weren't that charismatic. That's my opinion. Moving on to Michael Irvin. Michael Irvin was on or is still awaiting for his trial. They moved the trial from Dallas, Texas to Arizona, where the Marriott is. My From my understanding, the reason why they did that was because Irvin was getting so much better representation and publicity from being in Texas, suggesting that's where he was a wide receiver for many years and still lives there. This was written by CowboysSI.com, Mike Fisher, who runs Fish Sports on YouTube. Give him a follow and subscribe to his channel because he does a wonderful job. This was written by his crew and it says Irvin, quote unquote, dark place vs. Jane Doe's evil mind. New info of $100 million lawsuit. It says Michael Irvin is still biding his time, fighting his way out of that dark place, and he hopes to be reemployed by NFL Network and ESPN, who we'll talk about a little bit later. Once he wins his $100 million lawsuit he filed against the Marriott and his accusers. The case has been moved to Arizona and there's been new developments. CowboysSI.com learned there's a summon where an issue to each of the key people who have some involvement in that fateful Super Bowl week incident in Arizona, which accused Irvin of sexual misconduct, while him and a hotel employee chatted in a lobby. It's also worth reporting that Jane Doe asked for her identity to remain confidential. Irvin and his attorney, McCath, agreed to grant that to the defendant, while also asking for a jury trial. Let's stop here. I have a question on, okay, I understand you're going to have a jury trial, but you also want to stay confidential. We know how this works. People go and someone says something to someone, and it gets said again to someone, and it's either said to a news place or loud enough so they can hear. Oh, this person is someone like, and they put a name together. And then that's how, okay, now we know who this Jane Doe is. So now this person either has to say, no, that's not my name, or yes, that's my name. Now they have to talk about it, even though I they're trying to keep it so she's only referred to as Jane Doe. It also goes on that the acquisition of the court documents that added some detail into Irvin's position. His complaint states defendants improperly took direct measures to scar Mr. Irvin's reputation, which had a direct and detrimental effect on his livelihood, business relationships, and prospective engagements. and caused him humiliation and emotional distress, which I agree with. That did, in fact, all happen. Defendants accomplished this result through unfair and wrongful means. That is a quote from his complaint. Irvin's side also argues defendants' actions were intentional, aggravated, and committed with evil mind and intent to cause injury or reckless or deliberate disregard of an unjustifiable substantial risk of significant harm to Mr. Irvin. Mr. Irvin is entitled to an award of punitive damages in the amount significant to punish the defendants and deter them and others similarly situated from engaging in like conduct in the future. Now, this is all being said because Michael Irvin was there, and in Dallas, the court moved to Arizona because the defendants said it was becoming a media sideshow because Michael was having press conferences inside the Cowboys facility in Frisco saying these are the new developments. They're not sending us the tape, so we can't tell what is going on. In fact, it goes and says that it continues and says CowboysOutside.com was present during Irvin's most recent media session, during which the Hall of Fame vehemently and passionately defended himself. His attorney showing to us that the hotel video that the defendants were long and unwilling to show despite orders from the court. Apparently, there was about 4 orders from the court to say, "Hey, to give the you have to give Mr. Irvin and his attorneys the video. You have to." And they did it over and over again, about 4 times before. And the rules that were given at the time, okay, Irvin's attorney can come, but Mr. Irvin has to stay here, but one of his attorneys can go. His attorney who I don't remember exactly who went, but went to go get it and got like a if you ever been to a TSA where you're getting where you get red flagged and you start getting patted down and scanned over and over again, that's basically what it's like. They weren't allowing him to take his phone, they weren't allowing him to do anything. When he walked in to get it, he was able to watch it the first time, and there was people in the room that from working at the Marriott. From my understanding, Irvin was able to watch it when his lawyer came back with it, but it's also possible that that was the first time he saw it during that media session in Frisco. Irvin said at the time during that media session, "I know I didn't do anything wrong. It's just sickening." Irvin's talking about the fact that he believes he didn't do anything wrong. Irvin also admitted earlier on a local radio station, 105.3 The Fan, said, I know I talked to a person, but a little too I had a little too much to drink at the hotel, so I was going up to my room, so I think the conversation went about 60 seconds when the conversation actually went about 4 minutes. But if you've actually listened to a person who has a couple drinks and they do lose track of time, like, it just happens where they think 2 minutes have only gone by, turns out it's been about 30 minutes that have gone by, and they just don't know. So, it's not out of the realm. But Michael Irvin saying that, especially early on, it's it's shocking. It is also shocking that the Marriott held on to it because it was security camera footage. And to my understanding, there was no sound to it. So if they're saying that Michael Irvin said what he said is true, how do we know? How do we know? We didn't hear anything. We saw the tape. She didn't try and, like, escape him. She didn't really move around crazily. So, it's just one of those things of it becomes a he said, she said situation, which, from my understanding of how the courtroom works, they usually try to deter from. They try to get away from it. Also, one thing is for certain, if they allow a grand jury in, they might also have to allow cameras in or a police sketch art or a sketch artist in, a courtroom sketch artist, which also would have to be allowing if you allow cameras in there, that is another way it gets out of who this person is. Also, it allows one more person to just now because like you saw with the Johnny Depp Amber Heard courtroom of how people would just stream the whole court, just sit back and watch this all transpire and stream it on and have it on the live stream. You don't think that would get any bit of it? Of course it would. Of course. 100%. So that's where we are with the Michael Irvin situation. Two the last two things will be Jerry Jones is having a docu-series about him and the good old day Cowboys. That will be a 10-part series that Netflix is gonna run. Supposedly Netflix paid about $50 million for, which people who say they won't watch it, they will absolutely watch it. 'Cause it will be interesting to see how a business mind like Jerry Jones works and how he does all these things. That will be interesting. And the last thing, we actually get away from the Cowboys. We're gonna talk about the Saints. Not specifically the Saints, but Foster Monroe. Foster Monroe, who played with the Raiders, he got signed to the Saints this offseason. Early in the offseason, he was announcing that he had cancer. He had Hodgkin's lymphoma. The Saints still decided to sign him, which I thought was a great deal. I liked it personally that the Saints would do that. I thought that was a great job by them. That was also a very positive thing to do. Monroe, in fact, said that he would, in fact, play this year, in which we all thought, okay, that's a great goal, but we don't know. Well, Monroe said his cancer, his Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis, that happened, I believe, in mid-March, and he signed with the team in May. He has announced that it's in full remission. He goes on and says, after a few tumultuous months, I have been blessed with the news I'm in full remission from Hodgkin's lymphoma. I am so grateful to everyone who has reached out to offer their love and support. Our prayers were answered. From here, I will continue to live my life as God intended. He goes on and said earlier in spring, Monroe announced that he was diagnosed with lymphoma. And to answer the question, yes, he will play this year. The question is more of how much will he play? But I really enjoy when you hear stories like this because as bad as the world can be, when you can get to this moment and a person can come out on the other side of a darkness, it's very inspirational to me, and it helps our game out a ton with how much negativity there is. but great news for the Saints and for Foster Monroe as he can enjoy playing the game that he loves. For NFL World, I'm Jacob Hebert. Out.